And welcome to our fourth and final New Economy Live event of 2020, Transforming Calgary into a Learning City, hosted by our research and strategy team at Calgary Economic Development. My name is Jason Ribeiro. I serve as the Director of Strategy at CED, and I will be your host and panel moderator for the next 75 minutes. We felt this was too important a topic to address in the 60 we usually allot, so thank you for being here today. As always, I want to begin this event by acknowledging the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is home to all of us who live, work, and play in Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Thank you so much for taking time out of what I know must be a busy December for you all, and we hope the perspectives and research outlined today really tackle this talent question in our community and prove useful to you in your work and business, at home, and in community. Before we get further into our program for the day, I'd like to invite you to get your Twitter fingers working here and join the conversation on social media using the hashtag #NewEconomy, and share any questions, insights, and learnings with your fellow Calgarians online. While the chat function will remain closed for today's proceedings, you can post a question or comment using the Q&A function right here in Zoom that we can address during today's event or even offline. It's important that you actively participate as well and upvote questions and comments from other attendees, as we will aim to tackle the most popular posts before the hour is up. You can do that by clicking the thumbs up sign next to a post that appears in that Q&A box. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the New Economy Live series was created to bring together members of the public to learn about our community's economic strategy, Calgary and the New Economy. A few simple rules have underpinned our approach. These events needed to be free to attend, citizen-focused, pair you with high-quality research, and feature truly inspiring speakers. And given today's lineup, I'm quite confident that we've delivered the goods. The vision of Calgary in the New Economy is that Calgary becomes the city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs who embrace technology to solve the world's greatest challenges, including cleaner energy, safe and secure food, the efficient movement of goods and people, and better health solutions. A place that stands out not because we have all the answers, but because we'll run through a brick wall to get them. That's the city we're building together, and this is truly your strategy. So as you can see on the screen, the strategy features 4 interconnected pillars that we as a community need to focus on to create economic resiliency in Calgary: talent, place, innovation, and business environment. I mentioned earlier that this is our 4th event of 2020. Our first took us to the Center for Newcomers in February, where we discussed how we must view Calgary's new immigrants as economic drivers and actively support diversity and inclusion, which advances that place pillar's aim for Calgary becoming the most livable city in Canada for all. In October, we discussed how we can become Canada's most business-friendly city at a time where the traditional boundaries of business are disappearing, as digitization defines new ways of creating, inventing, interacting, and working. And last month, during Innovation Week in our city, we did a deep dive into how Calgary can solve not only a number of heady challenges, but can seize the AI opportunity and leverage the Alberta Innovation Corridor that is quickly forming between Edmonton and our city. A chance to apply world-leading research out of the University of Alberta to Calgary companies that are rich and awash with data. Today, and for the first time in this series, you will hear a joint research presentation between CED and our friends at the Business Council of Alberta that we feel not only demonstrates the high levels of alignment between our two organizations, but the alignment within industry on the skills that matter in the new economy. From there, I have the great privilege of taking you on a quick virtual tour of SAIT's new School for Advanced Digital Technology and introducing you to their chief catalyst, Jim Gibson, who will outline not only how this amazing investment came to be, but the approach that will underpin the school's training efforts in 2021. This will segue nicely into our expert panel, which I'm very happy we've been able to assemble today, featuring our newest Team Calgary member, Zaris, a technology leader specializing in digital transformation, whose mission is to help companies break down the technical barriers that restrict innovation and reimagine their business for the digital-first consumer. Their team of developers is located across North America, and they are both an Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud partner. The Calgary Board of Education, which has roots in our community dating all the way back to 1885. It is Western Canada's largest school district, where more than 14,000 public servants work to support the education of 125,000 students in over 245 schools in Calgary. Their mission is that each student, in keeping with their individual abilities and gifts, will complete high school with a foundation of learning necessary to thrive in life, work, and continued learning. And finally, our beloved Calgary Public Library, one of the busiest library systems in North America, whose mission is to empower community by connecting you to ideas and experiences, inspiration and insight, and whose central library downtown has won literally every global recognition I can think of, including 2 Grammys. And I think this morning, Times Person of the Year actually went to the library. No, I'm just kidding, but this is an essential part of the learning ecosystem, as you'll learn today. These organizations that I've just mentioned embody the vision of Calgary and the new economy. And I'm thrilled their senior leaders were able to join us today. We will follow the panel with an audience Q&A and close the event at 12:15, just in time for lunch. With that, I will turn things over to my colleague, Dexter Lamb, Manager of Talent, who just celebrated 1 year with CED. Happy anniversary, Dexter. And Mike Holden, who is the VP of Policy and Chief Economist at the Business Council of Alberta, to give an overview of our organization's collective talent development efforts, their overlap, and the path forward for not only transforming Calgary into a learning city, but creating a better Alberta as well. Dexter?
Great, thank you, Jason. So just to kick things off on a running start, we were really happy to see that there were significant overlaps and alignments between our early work on Learning City and the Business Council of Alberta's work on Skilled by Design. And we're really pleased to present a few common ideas here.
Thanks. And so, first of all, thanks to Jason for his comments earlier, and for Calgary Economic Development asking us to participate in this event. And as Dexter said, it was really interesting, this process with us working. We consulted with and worked in parallel with Calgary Economic Development, but it's, in going over these presentations and the work that we're doing, the work that the CED is doing, about how much overlap there is in identification of the issues that we see, as well as the goals that we're trying to achieve and what we believe success looks like. And so for those of you who don't know much about the Business Council, just very quickly, we're a relatively new organization. We're a business association comprised of Alberta's largest and most dynamic companies. And these businesses have come together really for a single purpose, and that is to create a better, more prosperous Alberta. And we do believe we can do that through a thriving business sector. And when we do this work, it's in 2 categories. One is looking at sort of short-term jobs and opportunity to create short-term benefits and growth for Albertans, but at the same time, our second pillar is looking to the future, looking to create a sustainable and competitive province, and everything that entails. And so one of the very first pieces of work that we did as an organization, this dates back to a little over a year ago now, was to look at this issue of skills development, training and retraining in Alberta. And we wanted this to be the first piece of major policy work that we did at the Business Council, because so many of our member companies have been pointing to this as an issue, and they wanted to tackle something that immediately showed something that was immediately beneficial, not just to themselves, but also to Albertans writ large. And so we produced this report. We published it in about June of this year. And really the motivation behind this work, it's as with everything else, it's clouded by COVID and the impact that has had on everything else. But even though some of the recommendations and work that we have that obviously touches on COVID and economic recovery related issues, it was really about a number of underlying systemic concerns that businesses had, that people had, about the changing nature of work in Alberta and what we needed to do to be able to address that. And so among these motivations is the fact that technology is changing the way we work. It's changing every kind of job that we can think of. And it is also eroding the useful life of the skills that we acquire. And so even if you just think about the kinds of technologies that we're using right now today on this call, Zoom calls like this were not a common feature not too long ago. And if you can go back 5-10 years and think about how we worked back then, and the change has been rapid and accelerating. And so there is a need to adapt to that. And at the same time, there was a recognition within the business community that, even prior to COVID, the Alberta economy had been struggling since the oil price crash, really, in 2014, 2015. And so there was a need to do something to try to be able to get the province back on its feet, try to attract new investment and new growth. And at the same time as the economy was relatively flat, businesses were still reporting that they had persistent skills shortages. And those shortages were not just in some technical professions, especially anything related to the digital economy, but also a growing gap in soft skills, in these kinds of these day-to-day functioning competencies, things like critical thinking skills, strategic management, even simple things like getting along well with others, and how interpersonal skills, creative thinking, those kinds of things. And so there was a need to look at those issues as well. And at the end of the day, what this was really all about was two things. One is creating a more resilient and more adaptable workforce in Alberta, resilient to technological change and adaptable to those kinds of changes. And also the fact that even in spite of flat growth over the last little while and the COVID recovery now, that for Alberta to prosper in the future, we really need to attract the best and the brightest to this province. And we need to retain the best and the brightest that are here right now. And so a lot of the work that we did focused not just on the specific aspects of skills training and retraining that we could do, but also on this attraction piece about making sure that we have the people that we need, that people want to be here, and that we can become a magnet for talent. So go to the next slide, please. So I'll talk very quickly about the work that we did, about one part of it. So in our report, which the link was on the previous slide there, you have, we chose to look at 3 specific areas, and the overarching one of those was this notion of building a better Alberta. And that really, it relates in part to COVID recovery, but it's the last couple of things I touched on, things about attracting the best and the brightest people, unlocking the innovative potential of Albertans and of Calgarians specifically, and creating an attractive and welcoming work environment. And there are a couple of specific components to that in our work. One is focusing on unlocking the innovative potential of Albertans, changing the way we work so that businesses can take advantage of the skills that we see. And those skills can be multi-generational. They can be people coming from different cultures, different backgrounds. And there's a widespread recognition that this kind of diversity is a strength in Calgary and in Alberta, and that businesses needed to do a better job of taking advantage of that strength and allowing Calgarians and Albertans to be able to do what they do best. And so there's a lot of exploration about different ways of work, about making sure that about trying new innovative ideas about how companies can get people together to second them to work on solving the biggest challenges that they face, and things like that. And so, and as I said before, this is all really about this notion about building a modern skills, adaptable and resilient workforce, which is what we all want going forward. So pass it back to Dexter. Yeah.
We have a running joke at Calgary Economic Development that in every meeting, Dexter is on mute, and today has proven no different.
I'm trying to be polite. Okay, thank you. So I was saying adaptability is a word we hear a lot today. And when we hear adaptability, it's often paired with resilience and prosperity nowadays. But what does that actually mean? We're all likely intuitive to get adaptability to some degree. We ourselves have moved into new environments and jobs where we've had to adapt, but how much of that was instinctive versus intentional? So what if that ability to adapt and the how we approach change was acknowledged as being as a valuable enabler for meaningful lives? So some of us are probably thinking right now, hey, I've adapted to a lot of different situations that I've done quite well for myself. That's great. Some of us are likely trying to face challenges right now that might seem bigger than us too. That's a reality. So what if we try to enhance every Calgarian's ability to make sense of, navigate, and build ourselves better through change. And that's what adaptive capacity is. So just as the Business Council of Alberta's work was supported by a task force, LearningCITY was grown out of a seed of collaboration between almost 30 researchers, educators, and business leaders, such as the Canada West Foundation and the Calgary Chamber. When we think of how we define our livelihoods as individuals and economies as collectives, we tend to focus on specific jobs and industries and those outputs. We currently spend up to 2 decades of our educational systems developing skills that really at this point only have half-lives of about 6 years now in our real world. So our world is now changing at such a pace that our economies are no longer reliable for defining meaningful career outcomes that will last a lifetime. So if we're trying to help Calgarians define their potential by the abilities that they can develop over their entire lives, we need a framework to help Calgarians understand both how to set meaningful destinations, which will change throughout their lifetimes, and how to navigate their way to each of those destinations. So while we've used our economies to define the potential of people so far, and like what they're capable of doing for decades, but what is our economy, but does our economy define our people and what they aspire to produce? Or should it be that the collective aspirational output of our people define our economic potential? What could our economy be if we removed barriers and added fuel for enhancing Calgarians' abilities to do and create new things? So if we've created adaptive individuals, how do we scale that adaptability? We have adaptive institutions, which are built by and help reinforce adaptive individuals. They provide processes and systems that enable collective behaviors and capacities such as culture and outlets for collaborative productivity. Dynamic and adaptive institutions facilitate knowledge exchange and experimentation, which are key to continuous learning. Furthermore, adaptive ecosystems are formed by the relationships between these adaptive institutions and organizations. These ecosystems provide social purpose and mobility for the outputs of these adaptive people. Open ecosystems are built on common goals of maximizing the value throughout the ecosystem instead of just the individual players. And the alignment of this principle of continuously enabling dynamic and empowering learning from the individual up to the ecosystem is how Calgary can be transformed at the city scale. Next slide, please. So whereas our current economies are used to define the accountabilities of our educational systems, the adaptable ecosystem we propose puts the agency and accountability of learning back on the learner and reframes the priority of institutions as supporting infrastructure. So what we propose for learning cities comprised of an inclusive set of relationships between all the organizations. You can see some of the key players in that middle ring. Enabling infrastructure to facilitate knowledge and resource exchanges, and then a shared common purpose, commitments, and values that govern all members. We don't need to burn anything down and rebuild from scratch. Because it's an ecosystem, we believe we can leverage and through collaboration and nudge the current members to propagate systems impact and get to where we want to go with whoever's here already. Next slide, please. So I've now described sort of a playground or a gym where Calgarians can practice being effective lifelong learners. So where do we start in reality? We start with the building blocks that Calgarians will be using to innovate new technologies, create art, build businesses, and make better decisions with. Many of us are familiar with many models for defining skills and competencies. And do we really need another one? Now, the Calgary competency model that I'm about to describe is meant to be a framework for supporting lifelong learning specifically. It's for us to understand how different skills and competencies come together to enable different abilities. It's not meant to exclude or supersede any other way to define what's useful or not. It's meant to be industry agnostic, contextually agnostic, and it's meant to work like a universal translator between different languages that places use for describing skills and competencies, like that between business, professional practices, and educational institutions. Another way to think of this is like a compass to help learners navigate different competency landscapes. So within the CCM, we have 2 different areas of skills. We have domain competencies, domain-specific competencies. These are the typical job skills that we're most familiar with. And then we have what we are typically called enabling competencies, or these are the soft skills. These are the essential skills that we might sometimes refer to them as, but we haven't necessarily developed them and as much put as much emphasis on continuous development as we have with the domain-specific competencies. These are the areas such as analytical competencies like contextual agility, creativity, systems thinking, interpersonal competencies like collaboration, emotional intelligence, foundational literacies like civics, financial literacy, and communication, and professional competencies like decision-making, leadership, and professional identity. Now, these two sets of competencies work together. Whereas the enabling competencies provide a foundation for personal success, the domain-specific competencies enable really specific roles in an organization, within roles in organizations. So one last quick analogy I'm going to draw from is something that my team members found useful. So the CCM is like describing what a Pokemon is and all the different attributes that make it different, that give it different abilities. I'll now let Mike describe how we have different approaches for how to catch them all.
I've always been so good at enough for remembering to unmute myself, and that might have been the first time I've ever been caught doing it. So it's, I've never heard a Pokemon analogy used before, so congratulations on that. Yeah, so it's one of the interesting things from us, from our perspective on doing all of this work is when we met with Calgary Economic Development a number of months ago about this and discovered that we were working on these issues in parallel and really trying to tackle the same problems from slightly different perspectives. And so this issue of everything that Dexter talked about with competencies was exactly identified, maybe framed in a slightly different way from the business community in terms of the work that we're doing. And from their perspective, for the businesses, the problems that they were trying to solve are some of the ones I touched on earlier. And so this is this notion back to this circling back to this idea of adaptability, about the fact that technical demands are changing and workforce needs are changing, and there's the need for the soft skills that Dexter outlined. And one of the ways that the business community is looking to work with post-secondary institutions, Albertans, and other stakeholders is on this notion of micro-credentialing. And these can be done in small, and you can think about this as a small bite-sized bit of training that you can acquire, that you can get a certificate for in relatively short order. It could be a few hours, could be a few days, few weeks, depending on the size of it. And then that's something that is to certify and acknowledge that you have the skills or the competencies in some of the areas that Dexter outlined. And those could be in technical fields. It could be something as simple as, you know, you're proficient in Microsoft Excel. And you know, so if you're looking to hire somebody and are wanting to know if they have that level of proficiency, can they provide some sort of badge that states from a verifiable or an independent third party that yes, this person does indeed have this particular skill? And so that kind of thing doesn't have to be technical. It could be about, you know, creative thinking, could be about your writing skills, could be about, you know, much of anything. And so this is a main focus of the work that we're doing, is trying to create these small pieces of training and skilling and upskilling. And there are a couple of advantages to that. One is that you acquire the skills you need when you need them. And then you can tailor your own education, training, and career path by choosing which little kind of Lego building blocks you want to use to build up your own unique set of competencies. And so this is an area that we're exploring with a number of post-secondary institutions, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But I think that one of the really interesting parts about all of this is that you don't necessarily need to get formal training to be able to do this stuff. And so we talked earlier about the Calgary Public Library and all the amazing resources that they have there. And you know, and there's a wealth of YouTube videos out there to be able to teach things. And so in a lot of cases, what we see in our education and training system is people will need to get a degree or certification in something that they happen to already know a lot about, but they need to jump through those hoops in order to, you know, get the certificate or the degree or the diploma or whatever it is that they need to prove that you can do the thing that you knew you could do all along. And so one of the really exciting things we're looking at is how can we develop a system of training where you can verify that you have the skill before you take the course. And so the idea here is that if you happen to be a skilled guitar player, if you can just demonstrate that to somebody who has the ability to issue a certificate or diploma, then you don't have to waste your time taking the course. You can just prove that you can do the thing already. And then if you can't, because you failed the test, then you can take the course. And so these are the kinds of interesting ideas that we're trying to advance with the work that we're doing. And the two issues that we're working on that could throw a wrench into all of this is the questions of transferability and recognition of these credentials. And those are the areas where we're trying to focus our work on right now is just because somebody gives you a certificate that says that you're allowed to, that you're competent at this particular thing that you can do, it doesn't necessarily mean that another business would recognize that as being a legitimate competency. And so that's an area that the business community is focusing on, because they recognize the need and the value of this kind of training and retraining, upskilling, but need to work together better themselves in order to be able to coordinate and advance the use of these kinds of things. Next slide, please. So the other area that we're working on that was also touched on in Dexter's diagram there was this whole notion of experiential learning. And this is another area, this is the third pillar, the culture of lifelong learning was the second. The third pillar of the work that we're doing, and this is really about work integrated learning programs. We think about those typically being co-op programs, work placements, in engineering are the most common ones that everybody knows about. And from the business perspective, these things are extremely valuable. They see, for several reasons. And the main gap that businesses see that they're trying to fill is hiring people, graduates that have work-ready skills. And so that this is the idea of being able to apply classroom knowledge into a real world setting. And work integrated learning programs like co-ops, like internships, and so many others are seen as a fantastic way to do this. And it provides a number of benefits for the business. It provides the opportunity to test drive potential future employees. It allows them to have some training on how they function in their unique office settings, so that if they do hire somebody, then they can hit the ground running. We're exploring areas where we can use some of the real world problems that businesses have in a classroom setting to help advance some of their skills and training. So we're working on ways for a business to be able to say that, hey, here's a big problem that we have. And, with climate change being a front page issue everywhere, if a business, for example, is looking to find ways to cut their greenhouse gas emissions or trying to make their production process more effective, they can create this kind of a problem, say, okay, how do we fix this? What can we do? And bring it to a school where it can become a classroom project, it can become a research project, and allows students to learn as they go, and as well, and do so in a way that benefits the community at large. And the final point I want to make from our perspective on this experience-based training is that these kinds of work integrated learning programs are not just about creating work-ready students and people who can just fit into a slot and be ready to go. There's a recognition within the business community that this is a two-way street, and that there is a lot that they can learn themselves from people who come into these kind of experience-based experiential learning processes, because people come in with new ideas, they come in with new innovations, they can look at how your business operates from a fresh perspective and say, well, why do you do things that way? There's this other option that's clearly available. And I'm sure we all know that we get set in our ways and maybe not be as open to new ideas and new possible ways of doing things. And so this is an opportunity that businesses see for them to learn themselves from the people that they bring into these programs. Let's go to the next slide, please. So just to wrap up from my end, so we released this report in June, and it contained a number of recommendations, far too many, for governments, for the business community themselves, and for the Business Council of Alberta. And so what we're doing now is we're in the process of trying to advance some of these recommendations to create the kind of continuous learning environment that we've been talking about so far. And so what we're going to be doing in the next little while is assembling a group of businesses to get together with post-secondary institutions to talk about opportunities for growth in this micro-credentialing, upskilling, and work integrated learning program areas. And so what we're going to be doing is looking at identifying what a competency is, and trying to find common ways for businesses to be able to define, okay, this is, if I'm looking for somebody who has a level 1 accounting, just to make something up, what does that mean? What does that look like? Or if we're looking to test competencies in cognitive reasoning, what does that look like? What are the components of that? How do we know we've got this? How do we know we've wrapped a box around this or a circle around this? And so we're going to be doing that kind of work and looking to find ways to expand not just technical, but also soft skill micro-credentialing opportunities and work integrated learning programs, and then reaching out to post-secondary institutions and partnering with organizations like Calgary Economic Development, who's doing very similar work, to be able to try to create and take some next steps towards creating this more dynamic, more responsive kind of system of training and upskilling.
Cool. And for us on LearningCITY, we've got an ambitious agenda going. We recognize that there's a need for systems approaches to get the systemic change that Calgary needs. So we'll likely be hearing and reaching out to you, a lot of you, in the next few months. And that's all, that's what we'll do. The next slide has our contact information if you want to reach out for us. And otherwise, Jason's going to showcase a little bit about what SAIT's got going on.
Thank you so much to both Dexter and Mike, and to all of the community, industry, and research partners who have participated in and supported our collective efforts. Our city and province are undoubtedly better off for your contributions, and all of you, because I know it's a popular question in the chat, will be receiving the full Skills That Matter report after the program concludes. I'm sure someone on the team can post it in the chat. So thank you both. Again, I just want to very quickly do a drive-by on some of these questions that are populating in the chat. Carol, to your point around the Alberta government's 2030 review, I'm actually happy to state that both CED, myself, and the Business Council of Alberta, Mike, and our respective CEOs sit on the guiding coalition of that review. And so while that work is just about to reach its end date, we still are just in the midst of giving our feedback. What that might look like in terms of practical policy has yet to be seen, but they are listening. And things like the MyTax announcement that was made a few months ago, around $15 million for that experiential learning and training that Mike referenced, was, I think, in part due to our collective efforts of lobbying for more opportunities and leveraged federal dollars for those work integrated opportunities. There's also a question from my friend Rob in the chat about work integrated learning, and I couldn't agree more. We're not aiming to reinvent the wheel here. Products or software like Ripen, but also increasingly Magnet, are certainly companies that we've met with, and certainly ones that are being utilized by the post-secondaries. And to Dexter's credit in particular, we've actually assembled all of the post-secondaries in Calgary for a very substantive conversation and roundtable focused on what we can achieve together through both of those products to provide certainty to industry, but also certainty for the post-secondary partners to know that they're moving forward together on the conversations of work integrated learning versus anything piecemeal. So keep those questions coming. We're happy to answer them, and be sure to keep the conversation going on social media with #NewEconomy. With that, I have the great honor of giving those of you who haven't seen it yet a sneak peek at SAIT's School for Advanced Digital Technology. I look forward to the day where I can literally walk across the street from my office here and broadcast a tour live from the historic Oddfellows building. But for now, welcome to SAIT.
Welcome to SAIT. The future is now. soon.
Hi there, my name is Jim Gibson, and I'm the Chief Catalyst at the School of Advanced Digital Technology here at SAIT. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes with you talking about our future philosophy and programming that we're going to be establishing at the new school. But before I do that, I just wanted to say a couple of thank yous. First is to our good friends at Calgary Economic Development for the work that they've done over the past years in establishing the pillar of learning and skills development as a foundational part of the economic strategy. The LearningCITY initiatives, the economic strategy that they've been developing, the work that they've been doing with OSIF and the investments that they've made around the city are going to make a huge difference as we transform our city in the coming years. So thank you to Jason and thank you to the team at OSIF, whose generous gift of $8.2 million helped establish the school's digital transformation hub called the DX Talent Hub, which here we'll start to see some new programming coming in January and February. So thank you again to the OSIF team, but also another thank you to my good friend, David Bissett, whose generous $30 million gift to SAIT and to establish the School of Advanced Digital Technology has laid the groundwork for an incredible shift in the way we think about digital and digital transformation. So thank you to David and to all the work that you continue to do with the SAIT team. What I'd like to do is just quickly outline the philosophy of the new school and give you some idea of where we're headed. And I'll do that by talking about what I call our three customers. SAIT and the School of Advanced Digital Technology sees really three categories of students and learners that will absorb the new work that we're doing at the school. The first is a category that I call the job changers. Those are people who are either in mid-career or who have left a particular job, who are looking to reinvent themselves or looking to reinvent the existing company that they're a part of, digitally transform the way work is done, the way jobs are done, the way skills are needed to transform the world. These are what we call job changers. They are reinventing existing organizations, and they need a whole new set of skills to help them do that in transforming and rethinking the way work is done. Second category that we talk about is the job creators. These are those people who are building the amazing companies that I see every day, the new ventures of Calgary, the new startups, the new entrepreneurial companies who are literally inventing new categories of skills, new types of employment, and are going to be responsible for hundreds, if not thousands and tens of thousands of new jobs in new companies that are inventing this new future that we're creating. Very excited to work with this group of people to invent the new categories and fill the pipeline of needed jobs in the job creator category that I call. The third category is one that I call the future disenfranchised. These are the people in our city and surrounding that don't see themselves in the future that we paint. And it's up to us and it's up to schools like SAIT and the School for Advanced Digital Technology to find ways to engage and provide the skills that are necessary to make this happen. We call these the future disenfranchised because they don't connect themselves to the future, and we need to help get them there. So these three categories of customers or students or learners are where we're focused on here at the School of Advanced Digital Technology. And the way we're going to do this is really three ways. One is through awareness. We want to create programming and seminars and programming that helps all three of these categories of people understand what's coming. The second area that we are going to work on is the culture, the mindset shifts that will help create continuous learning individuals and companies so that they have the mindset that no matter what happens, that the skills and the training that they'll have, they'll be able to make the shift to this new world. And last are the specific skills that we're looking to help transfer and deliver to our three categories that I talked about. skills like machine learning and data, skills like game development and VR and AR, skills like life sciences innovation, and so on and so forth. So as we spend the next few months establishing our programming, stay tuned to the SAIT.ca website and the School of Advanced Digital Technologies website to learn more about some of the programming that's coming near you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you again to CED for the Learning City initiative, and back to you.
Thank you, Jim, for not only your friendship and collaborative spirit, but for the friendship that you've extended to the entire ecosystem over many years. So thanks again. With that, we're going to dive into the main event, our panel. And I want to continue. We're seeing the Q&A box light up, and a lot of work on social media with those Twitter fingers. Keep them coming, because we're going to answer a ton of them live off the floor, as I've been doing. So first, Jeremy Tooley is the president and CEO of Xeris. Welcome, Jeremy. Joanne Pitman is the superintendent school improvement with the Calgary Board of Education. Good to see you, Joanne. And Heather Robertson is the Director of Service Design at the Calgary Public Library. Welcome to you all, and wonderful to see you. So on this panel today, we have a representative from the private sector, the formal K-12 public education system, and our community's public library system. And I'd like to take a moment to ask each of you, wearing the hats I've just described, to outline, what role your organization plays in both helping Calgarians become lifelong learners, but also in helping us build a new economy. And I'll start with you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'd like to think, Xeris is helping shape technology and tech in the future of Calgary here. We're hiring a lot of Calgarians and upskilling them in tech here. And I like to think, we're promoting learning. We're promoting that culture within our company here. I think it's important for Calgary as a whole.
Wonderful. How about you, Joanne? Obviously you play a very formal role in that lifelong learning, but how do you see your organization's role in also helping build a new and more resilient economy?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate the earlier presenters, because they kind of teed it all up. Certainly as a K-12 organization, we set the foundation of both skills and the process of lifelong learning, the mindset, if you will. I would say though, and to Jim's point, that whole question of how Calgarians see themselves as part of something larger, that starts in our school system. And one of the interesting questions that we've really been asking ourselves is, how is it that our students see themselves as part of the city immediately, as contributors to something more than only after they enter the workforce? So that's something that we've really started to ask ourselves, and later on when I share some other pieces that we're doing, I think we'll connect into being part of a learning city immediately, not solely when one enters the workforce formally.
No, well said. And I think that foundational piece, when we talk about our economy, is often overlooked. And so I'd be happy to, former teacher to former teacher, get into that a bit, because I think it's an incredibly important one. And I think also, to your point, folks like Jim and others within industry are starting to make the case that this is something that we really need to draw a lot of attention to. I'll turn it over to you, Heather. What role does the public library system play in helping us become lifelong learners and tie in the beginnings of building a new economy?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here today, and for including the library in this discussion. It's such an important one. Public libraries play a critical role in providing access to information and accessible opportunities for learning and enrichment. And at Calgary Public, our goal is to design collections, programs, and services that don't just increase access to resources, but also inspire and empower that lifelong learning journey and build connected and engaged communities. And a large part of that is our commitment to reducing barriers to that and ensuring people have access to the tools and resources they need to build that learning pathway to help them realize their potential, whatever they determine that to be. And, all of our services are free. This includes a collection of 1.5 million physical digital items, 21 locations across the city with free space to read, play, learn, connect, virtual services such as online courses available 24/7, and outreach programs like our Story Truck or Book Truck, which take things from our facilities and into the community where they're needed. And, you know, also I would say as public libraries, we are also seeking opportunities to bring people and organizations together so that we can build connections and networks and partnerships that leverage our collective knowledge, experience, and resources and create more cohesive communities. And recognizing the power that curiosity brings to learning and growth and how it inspires creativity and innovation. And all of these things are really critical to a thriving economy and are things that we consider in the design of all of our services.
Thanks for that, Heather. I'll stay with you for a moment. You know, what's interesting about, you know, learning systems in this conversation that we're beginning, you know, we began actually a few months ago, but certainly formally kicking off publicly today. Your organization fundamentally is the Calgary Public Library. Your dissemination of knowledge and experiences and fostering of innovation and inspiration is already at the city level. And so when we talk about, you know, education and learning, which is largely, you know, dominated by, you know, being a provincial responsibility or viewed as a provincial responsibility, you have, you know, announcements even throughout COVID from the federal government talking about their role in retraining and skills. For you, why does it resonate with not only yourself, but the folks at the public library that the city level is the right realm to think about transforming learning?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, I think that understanding and responding to a local context is critical in designing services that both meet individual learning needs, but that collective need of the local community and economy, because Calgary has a wealth of organizations and community groups with expertise, skill, and resources that can support learning and development. And I think it's really important to recognize the roles of both those informal and formal learning opportunities and how they weave together and they complement and they build upon one another and they result in that stronger, more sustainable foundation. I think if we look at learning through a too narrow a lens, or we don't apply that local context, we can really miss that opportunity to create those truly impactful learning opportunities. And, you know, it's lovely to be here today with the Calgary Board of Education because that's one of our most rewarding partnerships. You know, it's working together with the school boards to understand the needs of kids and their educators and their caregivers, that we can together identify those opportunities that do connect those informal and formal learning opportunities, but also create opportunity or identify ways to add value and extend the learning outside of the classroom so that it's a continuum of support for students when they're in class or outside.
Well said, and you teed it up, you know, Joanne. There's a ton of partnerships that the Calgary Board of Education has locally, but also navigating that, you know, governance and those kinds of responsibilities, even related to funding, are also done at a provincial level. And so how do you strike that balance between, you know, managing what are expectations for Alberta education broadly, but also, you know, looking at the city as sort of on the ground reality where you can make an impact for students and families?
You know, I first of all, Heather, I really appreciate your comments because it really does center this perspective of learning does not only occur in one place, it is about our community. And as we attend to both the government provincial expectations and accountabilities that are well placed and we do well on those particular pieces, whether it be testing or otherwise, it is not the sole measure. And so in preparation for this panel, you know, the phrases that continue to come back to me, especially as we think about partnerships in the city of Calgary, is while we have a strong foundation of connections across the city, there is this tension of how do we maintain the provincial components required of all of our schools, but collectively as a system, open up the entry points for the city and workforce, all of those intersections to occur in a sustainable way. We've got great examples of start-up projects or connections between business, corporations, or the city itself, in fact, where things have started and investments have occurred to create opportunities for students, and we haven't seen those be able to scale. Not all things have to go to scale. It can also be about their collective, the number of individual opportunities, but we do need to look at how to be more efficient in the investment of that time. Certainly our examples of leveraging our dual credit strategy where we're partnering with SAIT, we're partnering with Olds College, the University of Calgary, providing our students and connecting them from high school to post-secondary and also our exploratory pathways programs, we have employers who are unbelievable supporters of our students, and their connection and their communication back to us is a key element. But we do have some further questions we need to be able to engage more formally with the business community as we prepare for new curriculum and as we center ourselves around how we design the time for our students in our schools.
Well, I heard the phrase startup and scaling, so I've got to go to Jeremy here. You know, depending on who you talk to in the tech ecosystem, it seems that attracting, retaining, and even upskilling, as you mentioned earlier, tech talent in Calgary for many folks has proved challenging. And so for attendees that may not understand why, could you just articulate quickly the pinch points companies like yours or potentially others have felt over the years when it comes to hiring the right tech talent to be able to scale your businesses in the market?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think there's a few things here. Is we're up against, you know, all the tech companies here, a growing ecosystem of giants. You look at Benevity, Cement, all of these companies. Like last week I saw on LinkedIn, there's 140 job postings right now for tech talent. It's hard to compete in that environment. And I think, you know, everyone wants the senior talent. They want the top talent. But I think we've got to look outside the box here and look at things like boot camps, things like the SAIT digital school, partnering. How do we work together as tech companies here and figure out how to hire within and maybe horse trade resources? Joanne, you mentioned something as well about high school, connecting with high schools. How do we get these companies in town here, connecting to high schools and making sure maybe we're teaching the students at that point that there's going to be unique challenges in Calgary that are different from the rest of the world. And do you want to work with these companies in Calgary? It's tough right now. You know, there's a lot of opportunity to reskill up people coming from oil and gas right now. And I think that leads into purpose-driven learning. How do you take these people who've got unique skills from oil and gas, relationship skills, stakeholder skills, communication skills, and move them into technology? It's not a big lift, for sure.
It's a salient point, and I think one that you know, as a result of COVID, many companies and particularly many cities and state level or provincial level economies are having to wrestle with, right? For folks that have been displaced out of work, particularly in industries or sectors that have been challenged, how do you solve for that upskilling? And I think, you know, you've talked about a sort of spectrum here where you have this, you know, highly educated on paper, you know, mid-year or mid-career, professional, but also the need for folks, you know, right in the high school needed to start getting that exposure to industry. I think it's a very salient point. But I'll go back to Joanne here. The foundation of this is around that formal education that folks receive. You know, we're talking about kindergarten and up. And so I want to throw a couple stats out here and see if they resonate with you the same way they do with me. You know, according to the most recent PISA scores available, those are the Program for International Student Assessment as ranked by the OECD. Alberta students rank 3rd globally at reading and science and 8th in math globally. It may just be me, but I don't feel like those stats get enough attention, or certainly not enough as they may deserve, nor does the fact that Alberta K-12 students are consistently ranked as some of the highest performing globally in course subjects. So as someone who's responsible for school system improvement, what are our education systems? You know, we've heard from Jeremy about, you know, potential acute challenges in the market, but what are the education system's most acute challenges, given that we're already such high performers when it comes to things like testing?
Well, I think it's all in how we define high performers and how we understand testing to be and what it does tell us. I'm going to maybe backtrack a little bit to that foundation and an article that I had tweeted out prior to this event that talks about the impact of literacy on economic development. And at its core, we set that foundation, and it's a critical priority. It's not flashy, it's not startups, it's foundational to ensuring equity. You talked about the event you had earlier around for our new immigrants and creating that opportunity. That is a critical role that the K-12 system plays, and creating opportunity for those intersections with community and with business within our city. When we talk about the success of our students, Albertan students perform incredibly well. And I'll also say even more specifically, Calgary students perform incredibly well. The question is are they staying? And how are we better supporting that distinct link to the city right now while they're in school so that they see themselves as contributors before thinking, I need to go elsewhere? And the other piece very specific to the foundation of literacy is that the breadth of literacy evolves with changes in the world, from technological innovation to the changing economic landscape. And we have to understand both the foundational literacy skills as well as that expansion that shifts as we think about the push, especially right now, around technological advancement and how we create the space now in a K-12 system. Flexibility is not always our strong point. And we have some real work to do about understanding our organizational pathways so that we can articulate where flexibility exists, where the foundation remains the same, and that we can, over time, really track that achievement so we can hold ourselves accountable to really supporting our students within the city to be the high performers that they show themselves to be on tests.
You know, it's a really salient use of the phrase sort of, flexible or inflexible. And I think it's no surprise that so much of the work that both the Business Council and our research team under the banner of Learning City found that adaptability, both at an economic level in the way that our systems interact with one another or companies interact with one another, but even as people, that while adaptability gets a lot of sort of buzzword recognition, we actually need to practice this. And, I've often talked about in a number of forums that, with an economy that has had a ton of boom times, that flexibility wasn't really required for a long period of time. And so it needs to be embedded within the DNA. And I think that's the hard work that both Xeris and community partners like the Library and Board of Education are certainly doing now. I want to go to Heather, and it builds off of a question that's bubbled up in the chat. With today's focus being on the quote unquote skills that matter, the implicit suggestion is that we hope that these are skills that matter to employers. This is a realm where I know our public library system does a good amount of work, and I'm not also sure gets enough of the credit. Can you outline for us the direct role that libraries play in helping Calgarians find employment and maybe highlight some of the relevant training that you guys have offered?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny, it's easy to think about skill development as a formal process, but it's often this messy, exciting mixture of books and programs and spaces, courses, online or in person, those informal activities, conversations, and building of community networks. And each of those components, I think, come together to create those steps forward to in those lifelong journeys. And for the library, absolutely, we have specific programs and services and tools and resources for people who are trying to upgrade their skills or get a new job or get further their career. But it's also a process for us that starts from birth. It's about inspiring that curiosity in children to explore, to question, and to learn. And then to, as an organization that is open for all, supporting Calgarians through all of those stages of lifelong learning. And, it starts in our public spaces. We have feature areas that invite and encourage people to play and learn in their own way, from 13 early learning centers across the city that inspire a love of reading and facilitate that foundational step for early learning skills, to questionarium spaces for school-age kids, where we're asking young ones to come together and do self-directed activities that foster that inquiry and critical thinking skill set, teen tech labs where teens can come and hang out, play with technology, share skills and hobbies, and the Idea Lab, which is focused more at the adult audience and a space where people can come together and explore design thinking. And then in addition to our collections, tools, providing access to tools to support learning. So desktop computers, laptops, free internet, free printing, free copying services all across our system, as well as 60 bookable meeting room spaces for people to study or work or meet. And yeah, we, as I mentioned earlier, we do lots of programs, and we do programs that are very specific to employment and skills training, including digital literacy, career and small business, interview prep, network sessions. Last year we were really excited to launch the Job Desk, and that's in a partnership with Bow Valley College. It's an opportunity to meet one-on-one on demand with a career coaching professional who can help you personally, work through your particular individual needs to help you get a job or further your career. And with the pandemic, everything has been up in the air, but we've been able to successfully transition that online. So you can visit our website and book a session with a career coach right through there. And then again, digital resources, 24/7 access to online courses. We have a package of courses called Gale Courses Online, 365 instructor-led courses available through that, completely free, as well as lynda.com, 7,000 plus short video tutorials on a variety of topics related to business, technology, education. And I'll just end with, part of what the library does too is about bringing community together, and volunteerism is a really strong way to build those workplace skills, to provide people to give an opportunity back to community, share their knowledge and skills with each other, and develop their own experience that they can contribute in employment. And we currently have 43 volunteer programs, and 3,900 volunteers gave 100,000 hours last year. So it's awesome. There's so much going on.
It's amazing to hear in some, and I would encourage all of you to be able to evangelize that message for those who need it. The notion that someone will sit down with you for free to guide you through your resume or interview prep is astounding. And I would also encourage you to volunteer if you can. This is a very on the ground way to get involved in the learning ecosystem, is by volunteering through programs like the ones that the Calgary Library offers. And I'm not just talking about that. I am one of those volunteers as well, who received my lovely gift, by the way, the other day. It was a pair of socks, really, really cool. I want to go to a question in the chat, because we talked about, that more career and employment focus, and it comes from Terry at the U of C, great innovation thinker. So Jeremy, what do you think the demand in industry is for the soft skills of entrepreneurial thinking, or that internal innovation skill set that might not be as overt when we think about the hard process work of innovation, but what do you suss the demand out is, not just for Xeris, but for industry broadly?
Oh, it's massive. Soft skills, I think, play 80% success in any role. I want to go to our boot camp. So we run a boot camp every year, and we bring a bunch of students through it for free. We upskill them, and out of that, we hire a bunch of them. And one of our success stories was a girl named Tia. I'm going to call her out here. She was a waitress before, came in, we upskilled her. She is now one of our best developers. And the reason she is so successful is her soft skills. She's able to deal with customers, be able to handle relationships, and work in those tough sort of environments. And I think you only get that from different experiences, working in restaurants, working in bars, dealing in different situations. Soft skills are huge, and it's only going to become more in demand as we move forward here in tech. You're dealing with difficult stakeholders, different problems, challenging outcomes. You need those soft skills moving forward.
Well said. Joanne, on that note around the soft skills, I think that puts a lot of the onus on a strong and robust public education system to develop them. And I think we're one of the only provinces in the country that has, this entrepreneurial thinking actually baked into its curriculum documents and vision. Just how much of an effect has that had, and what work do we still think that we need to do at the foundational level to make sure that those soft skills of creativity and critical thinking remain part of the ethos of a public education system here in this province?
That's a great question, Jason. I think one of what you've kind of separated is the what of learning versus the how of learning. And some really intentional work that's been ongoing is about this very distinct connection. This isn't about personality. This isn't about, evaluating whether or not you're a nice enough student or a kind enough child, any of those types of things. It really is baked into the very teaching methodology of how concepts are introduced and the ways in which students are able to engage, inquire, and take it further. I was interested in hearing the earlier references by Dexter and Mike referencing the competencies in the Learning City, and can make some really direct connections into the design within curriculum by the province, but specifically as well, there's there's a question at the heart of that is what's the progression? Because when we think about childhood development, we've got some work to do around being intentional to develop those skills that are appropriate to the development of a child as they go through the system. And that's something that no system truly has named explicitly and embedded fully, connected also to the what of learning, the content that then flows through. So we're at a pretty exciting time, and I think we also have a really great foundation to be able to engage with business. And Jeremy's said some things. Jeremy, you can expect a phone call after this, where, you know, it is about that intersection from business community to saying, hey, here's what we do related to provincial mandates, but how might we shift that or position that in our city differently to meet your needs as well and what you see coming as the future. So I'm really excited for the next, I'm going to put a time limit on it, the next 2 years around what engagement we need to do with our city differently.
Fantastic points, and we love to bring people together to broker collaboration and deals. And I think actually these are parts of what need to happen at scale, right? Is the conversations with the diverse parts of the ecosystem that we know are tackling different elements of the spectrum at potentially even different times. But ultimately, the success of Jeremy's company will hinge upon, not just in Calgary, but remote jurisdictions across North America, on the strength of their public education system, the access to folks that realize their full potential, which is part of the work that the library does from a mission and vision perspective, will be enabled by the offerings that they have that are freely accessible. Shame on us if we don't realize the opportunity for that person who's transitioning out of a job, that individual who has come to this country, not necessarily knowing the language or the customs, but has the resources provided to them to be able to say, hey, in my previous city that I was living in, I happen to have this credential. While it may not transfer explicitly, or I still have the skills. And maybe it's just that a little bit of finessing by attending a boot camp that Jeremy offers, or the career coaching that the library offers. And then for their children, the foundation and the bedrock of an incredibly robust and well-supported public education system here in Calgary. And so I want to thank all of you, Jeremy, Joanne, and Heather, for not only participating today, but for your commitment to advocating for the power of lifelong learning across all sectors and its role in transforming our city. So thank you so much once again. There's a number of questions in the chat about how you might get involved, not only whether you have job postings, whether you're a trade association or a union group, you name it, we will be listening to everyone. And so what Dexter talked about in that slide around next steps, there will certainly be a lot of work moving forward to have forums like this, to engage the public, to do these listening sessions, but also prototyping some of the ethos behind the skills that matter in community. And we're actually framing that pilot with our dear friends at Mount Royal University. And I do want to take one moment before I close to shout out the efforts of Dr. David Finch, who was a huge support in not only roping together the research team, and again, we talk about open source innovation, there's a question in the chat there, who opened up their post-secondary to serve as a sort of virtual and in-person hub for all of the other post-secondaries, for all of the other researchers. This was a sort of institutionally agnostic effort, but only by design due to their generosity. And so this is the kind of collaborative work that we need to move forward. And so thank you to our panelists, but also those who are responsible for the research today. I want to close by thanking all in the CEDN who continue to make this event series possible, and to our attendees, make sure to keep your eyes open for the Skills That Matter report that will appear in your inbox once the event has concluded. And with the end of the year fast approaching, and frankly, nothing else left to plug, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the very different holiday season we will be entering when the clock strikes midnight on December 13th in this province. It's hard to imagine that, as difficult as 2020 has been already, that at our most joyous time of the year, it's about to get more difficult. I want you to know that our organization is here to support you, our team is here to support you and that we hopefully emerge from this public health crisis with the perspective of just how much we can achieve and whether when we do it together. So please remain safe, wear your mask, buy local, and be sure to shoot a text or a call to someone who may need one over the next few weeks of the holiday season. And with that, we will end this New Economy Live as we've ended the previous three, now with an award-winning video we produced that sums up everything wonderful about this community with more visuals than words. You know it when you see it, and we can show you better than we can probably tell you. You can find it on YouTube on our Calgary Economic Development channel or in the chat, and it's titled "This is Calgary." So if you're thinking about what to tell a colleague abroad who's looking to relocate their family, or what you could show an investor thinking about where to grow their company, or what you could give your son, daughter, niece, or nephew to show them all we're building in the city, please show them this. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at a New Economy Live event in 2021. Happy holidays.
I know a place that's as tough as it is compassionate, a place with an unwavering work ethic and immeasurable heart. Qualities woven into the fabric of this city and its people. You see it in the day-to-day moments and the moments it's needed most. This place is Calgary, Alberta, a future-proof city, diverse in culture and diverse in economy. You might know it for its oil, farming, the Red Mile, or the greatest outdoor show on earth. But you'd only be scratching the surface. Calgary is a whole lot more. Anything is possible here. See, if you've got a dream and you're willing to do the work, Calgary has your back. The proof is in the people. The entrepreneurs that built this city, the innovators, risk takers, and artists. The proof is in the work they've done and keep on doing. It's in the culture they've created that keeps on inspiring. It's in the tech, energy, and life sciences sectors where cutting-edge, industry-disrupting work is being done every day. The proof is in our small businesses, a lot of them not so small anymore. This is the most livable city in all of North America, and one of the most livable cities on the planet. Fifth, actually, but who's counting? So what's that mean? It means clocking out at 5 and being in the mountains for 6. It's a short commute that's easy or fun or breathtaking. Calgary is a city with a proud heritage and a limitless future. And if you want to be a part of all this, a part of something big, something special, that time is right now. And we'd be happy to have you. Be part of the energy.